Welcome back, friends. Today I'm going to be going over the different shooting modes on a camera and when you want to be using each one of them. So if you're new to photography or you just want to know a little bit more about all of these different modes your camera actually has to offer, I know exactly how you feel. So not too long ago, when I actually started out with photography, I was also overwhelmed by all of the different signs and symbols on that dial on top of my camera, and I had also fallen for the myth that a lot of other YouTubers, bigger YouTubers, also like to perpetuate, that you're only a real photographer if you actually shoot in manual mode. Now, I don't want you to be as confused as I was, my friends, which is exactly why I will be breaking down all of these shooting modes piece by piece just for you. Now, if you do enjoy this video, then do pop down below and leave a like and subscribe, because it really helps me out and I do really appreciate it. Also, jump down into the description if you want to grab yourself some free wallpapers, and I'm sure there's also some other special links down there for you, so head down there if you're interested. But now I'm going to stop wasting time, so let's actually jump into the video. So the first mode I'm actually going to be going over is manual mode. Now, as I mentioned before, you've probably heard about this mode, and the way that you recognize it or you set this mode on your camera is by actually turning that dial onto that big capital N. Now, basically in this mode, everything is up to you. You are the one that's in control, and your camera is just gonna be there and be lazy. You have to set the aperture, ISO, and shutter speed yourself. And by the way, if you want to know how, or if you don't even know what those three things mean, then check out the other video I made above in the eye or in the description down below, where I cover all of those three things in detail. Now, because in manual mode you have to actually manually control all three of these things, using manual mode can actually quickly ruin the way your photos turn out if you don't really know what you're doing. And there is quite a lot of controversy going around as to whether using manual mode is actually good or bad for beginners. So I'm actually thinking about making a video about that topic too. If that's something that you'd be interested in, then let me know by leaving a like down below. Now, one big piece of confusion here is that manual mode has nothing to do with manual focus. You can still use autofocus or manual focus in manual mode, and manual mode really only relates to ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. If that much responsibility and control actually makes you feel stressed out, my friend, then don't worry, because I'm actually going to be covering all of the other shooting modes right now and in which scenario they would actually perform better than manual mode. Okay, so first off, let's cover aperture priority mode. So this mode is actually indicated either by a capital A and V or just a capital A on your camera, depending on which camera exactly you have. And basically, instead of having to focus on ISO, aperture, and shutter speed all at the same time, what this mode allows you to do is it actually allows you to only set or define the aperture before you shoot, and then the camera adjusts all other of these settings based on the aperture that you have chosen. So this means that you can actually set your own depth of field, and everything else will be done by the camera. And again, if you don't know what depth of field means, do check out that video up there or down there, as I mentioned before. So because this mode, aperture priority mode, actually allows you to define your aperture, you want to use this whenever you want to isolate your subject, be it when you're shooting a portrait, for example, and you really only want to get the person's face nice and sharp, or if you're kind of doing some product photography, any scenario where you want to isolate the subject that you're actually shooting. Next up is shutter priority mode, and because you're smart, my friends, I know that you can probably figure out what this mode does based on what I was just talking about in aperture priority mode. So basically, this mode, shutter priority mode, which is denoted either by a capital T and a capital V or just a capital S on your camera, allows you to only set your shutter speed, and then the camera adjusts all other variables, all other settings based on that shutter speed that you have defined. And when is shutter speed important? When do you want to actually like focus on setting your shutter speed? Now, this shutter speed is important when you're shooting things that are in motion. Again, if you want to know why or a little bit more details, check out that other video again, like I said. So you want to be using shutter priority mode whenever you're taking a picture of a person, animal, object that's in motion. Well, anything that's in motion, really. The next camera shooting mode that you can use is called bulb mode, my friend, and it's denoted by a capital B. So this one is actually a little bit more interesting than the other two I just covered, because bulb mode actually allows you to shoot long exposure photos, such as is light trails in the night. You've probably seen them. They look super awesome. Or waterfall shots where you really get that nice flow in the water. So generally any shutter speed above 30 seconds is counted as long exposure, but with bulb mode, you don't actually need to predefine this time before you shoot the photo. Now if you're like, what? Let me explain. So basically the first time you press the shutter button, the shutter actually opens, and then anything that happens up until the second time you press the shutter button, which is when the shutter closes again, all of that motion will actually be captured in the photo that you just took. So basically the first time you hit the shutter button, the shutter opens, you start taking the photo, and then the second time you hit the shutter button, the shutter closes and your photo is finished. Now, two little pieces of advice I want to give you here, my friend, is to actually use a tripod and a remote shutter, because otherwise, due to this long exposure, you're gonna get a lot of camera shake. So yeah, those are just some little pro tips for me to help you guys out. Okay, so we're almost there, but next up is program mode, which is actually indicated by a capital P on your camera. This mode is similar to automatic mode, which I'll get to in just a second, but it just gives you a little bit more control. So the exact amount of added control actually really varies by camera brand, but generally it's things like turning on off flash, setting ISO, setting white balance, while all of the other variables kind of act as though your camera was in automatic mode. Now I do admit that this one is kind of the most confusing also to actually describe or explain to you, my friends, because it really does vary a lot from camera to camera and brand to brand. Okay, now if all of the other modes I just covered still sound like too much stress for you, my friend, then automatic mode is probably the best mode for you. Automatic mode is indicated by a capital A on your camera. Now if you don't see a capital A but you do see a capital P, then that capital P doesn't actually mean program mode, but it means automatic mode. Yeah, don't ask why they made it that confusing. Anyways, automatic mode basically allows you to... Ow. Anyways, automatic mode basically allows you to use your camera like a point and shoot. So the camera actually analyzes everything that's in your frame and then adjusts the settings according to those lighting conditions and also the object that you might want to focus on. And this is really the simplest mode that you can use. So I hope that this video helped you out, my friends, in clearing up what the different shooting modes on your camera actually mean and when to best use them. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please do head down below and leave a like and subscribe. It's all I'm asking for in return. It's totally free and it really does help me out with the algorithm. As always, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and I'll see you soon.